Anyone who entered the Capitol without proper authority, that's a dude, okay? That's not Cassidy. It's not the same, not even close. Eric Hirschman wrote it, not Cassidy Hutchinson. Busted that the handwriting that appears on the questioned document was written in the same hand as Hirschman, not Cassidy Hutchinson. Clavicle Girl is back. Cassidy Hutchinson testified when she was having her powwow with Liz Cheney during the January 6th fake committee hearings. She said that she was the author, that Clavicle Girl herself wrote this document as part of the official happenings back on the day of January 6th. And we remember the testimony from her. We'll replay it here in a second. But a handwriting expert has confirmed that that story may not be accurate because her handwriting looks like this. We've got the full report that we'll go through, but remember this testimony because this was part of what the media said was shocking. And oh my gosh, she was a firsthand witness. She was there. She saw all these things. And remember that Cassidy, and before she actually testified, and this is Cassidy, remember she came out in her white jacket and the media, oh my gosh, they called a special emergency hearing and they freaked everybody out. She's going to have some shocking testimony. Turns out, in our opinion, she just got up there and lied, made up a bunch of stuff. She was represented by a Trump lawyer. Then Liz Cheney stole her from defense lawyer, right? Let me not say a Trump lawyer, but somebody who was defensive of that position as opposed in opposition to the lawless January 6th Select Committee, which wasn't even legally constituted under their own rules. HR 503 confirmed that. We can look that up as we have about 1,000 times here. So all that being said, she's here testifying and let's refresh our recollections on how this went down.
Ms. Hutchinson, could you look at the exhibit that we're showing on the screen now? Have you seen this note before?
That's a note that I wrote at the direction of the Chief of Staff on January 6th.
You wrote it?
Likely around 3 o'clock.
And it's written on a Chief of Staff note card, but that's your handwriting, Ms. Hutchinson?
That's my handwriting.
Really?
And why did you write this note?
The Chief of Staff was in a meeting with Eric Hirschman and potentially Mr. Philbin, and they had rushed out of the office fairly quickly. Mark had handed me the note card with one of his pens and started dictating a statement for the president to potentially put out. There were 2 phrases on there, one illegal and then one without proper authority. The illegal phrase was the one that Mr. Meadows had dictated to me. Mr. Hirschman had chimed in and said, also put without legal authority. There should have been a slash between the 2 phrases. It was an or if the president had opted to put one of those statements out. Evidently he didn't. Later that afternoon, Mark came back from the Oval Dining Room and put the palm card on my desk with illegally crossed out, but said we didn't need to take further action on that statement.
Okay, so sounds like that whole story is just made up. That she didn't write that at all. That Eric Hirschman, the lawyer who she referenced in there, is the guy who actually wrote it. All right, so if she's lying about stuff like that, then you just go, okay, she's just a liar, right? Her entire testimony is lacking in any credibility because she lied. So we go through that. We know that's what she said, and that was apparently the truth at the time, but now answer is no, she didn't write it, according to this expert. Says, Committee on the House Administration, Chairman Brian Steele, he released this along with Barry Loudermilk, the oversight chairman. They've released new evidence, they say, that indicates that Cassidy Hutchinson, who we just heard from, knowingly provided false testimony, lied, to the Select Committee on January 6th regarding the origins of the handwritten note that was given to Trump on J6. Says, as first reported by Will with ABC News, the handwritten note was the draft for a proposed tweet for President Trump to send, advising rioters to leave the Capitol. He says, text read, anyone who entered the Capitol illegally without proper authority should leave immediately, with the word illegally scratched out. There's a higher res photo of the card. And if you, without even knowing the story, if you just had guess, who wrote this? Man or woman? Male or female? What would you guess? 9 times out of 10. Male, obviously, because my handwriting kind of looks like that. Now, during her public hearing on June 28th, Hutchinson testified under oath that she personally wrote this note as the president's chief of staff, right? I wrote it, she said. Mark Meadows and Eric Hirschman, one of the president's attorneys, dictated it to her. Her public testimony to this event was consistent with her first transcribed interview with the Select Committee on February 23rd, 2022. However, immediately after her public testimony about the note, the other guy, Eric Hirschman, immediately refuted her testimony and has maintained for years that he's the one who actually wrote the note. And Eric Hirschman is no friend of Trump in our interpretation of his post-J6 availability to Liz. Now, during their investigation, the Select Committee never contacted Hirschman, right? Here's where it gets even worse. To confirm the authorship of the note or to ensure the accuracy of their meticulously sourced final report. As the Select Committee consistently did with all of her testimonies, they accepted and they promoted her claim without any corroboration at all, because it was fake, or seeking evidence to substantiate anything she said. Now, to resolve the controversy over who actually penned the note, the select committee claimed to have reviewed Hutchinson's handwriting. So Cheney says, well, let's just compare it. Just bring me both samples. And determined her handwriting was consistent with the script of the note, right? So this is an excerpt from the J6 in the report. They say, 2 witnesses recall writing this note, Cassidy Hutchinson and Eric Hirschman. Although Hutchinson recalls that Hirschman was responsible for the revision made to the note, the committee's review of Cassidy Clavicle Girl Hutchinson's handwriting was consistent with the script of the note. Now, select committee to investigate the J6 attack transcribed the interview, and they say who wrote the note is not material to the committee. The important point is that it was prepared for the president. Okay, well, why did you introduce it through Cassidy Hutchinson then? Why didn't you bring in Eric Hirschman? Why was it part of her testimony? Well, it's because they needed other things for Cassidy to make her a credible person, and they had nothing, so they made it up. So here is another, looks like, handwritten note from Cassidy. Now, as we tried earlier, if you just forget everything about this case, everything, if I just showed this to you in front of a blank slate and said, what is the gender of the author of this note, what would you say? Obviously female. It's bubbly, it's hearty, there's a peace sign and then a little heart and smiley in there. Anyone who entered the Capitol without proper authority, that's a dude, okay? That's not Cassidy. It's not the same, not even close. Sorry, no, doesn't match, no. So to resolve the claims, the Oversight Committee went and they got an expert, an independent certified handwriting analyst, which I can't wait to read it. I can just see the handwriting expert back there, you know, like with test tubes and like beakers, concocting everything. It's like, are you joking? Look, it's right here. What do you need an expert? No, it's not the same. The Oversight Subcommittee also got several samples of Mr. Hirschman's handwriting, which were used by the forensic document examiners to determine if the note was written by him. So now the question is, did he write the note? After a thorough analysis, their certified handwriting analyst stated in the report, quote, "The evidence supports my opinion that the handwriting that appears on the questioned document was written in the same hand as the exemplars. Eric Hirschman wrote it, not Cassidy Hutchinson." Busted. Now, Hutchinson, as we know, testified under oath at her hearing. She said, "I wrote that note," echoing the testimony that she said during her first transcribed interview. Right now, she was also kind of bought in on this too. So now it's a sunk cost, right? She's already said that. She testified that Mark Meadows dictated to her illegally, and then Eric Hirschman, one of the president's attorneys, dictated without proper authority, and then Hutchinson just wrote both those down. Now, then she wrote a book about it, and a bunch of liberals on MSNBC bought it. They're like, wow, she's so brave and heroic. And so they bought her book. She says, enough. She's so inspirational. And she continued to assert that she wrote the proposed tweet for President Trump in her own book, claiming that Chief of Staff Mark Meadows shoved a blank note card and pen in her hand violently as the insurrection was happening, and then smashed her forehead into that. It says, "Write this down for me. We're drafting a tweet for the insurrectionists." That's in her book. So then Chairman Loudermilk said of the following note, he said, "This new evidence provided by an independent certified document examiner not only contradicts her numerous claims that she penned the note, but also exposes the J6 committee's willingness to accept all her testimonies without corroboration or further investigation." So that's another layer to this. It says, during the select committee's professionally produced primetime television hearing, Hutchinson was marketed, remember this, as their surprise star witness. We were covering her, like, what is she going to say? Come out. And we go, clavicle? We were sitting here, clavicle? Trump clavicled America. All right. Hutchinson testified under oath to several extraordinary events, including that Trump lunged at the steering wheel of the presidential SUV and engaged in a physical altercation, that's the clavicle attack right there, after being told that they're not going to the Capitol. And then Melania was on that rope ladder hanging out of that attack helicopter. The select committee eagerly accepted her testimony as fact because they didn't care, without any verification at all. Now, their initial findings report shows that 4 other White House employees did not corroborate her dramatic account, which never happened. Instead, they directly refuted it. They said it never happened. The committee was in possession of these documents, but they chose to hide them. And we read that report. It's sick that we have such a propagandized organization in America that's being led by Liz Cheney and endorsed by the Democratic Party, and instead promoted Hutchinson's scandalous narrative. Our subcommittee has obtained the transcribed interviews of the Secret Service agents, including the driver of the SUV, who refuted her testimonies. Never happened. Liz Cheney could have gone through, okay, so maybe Cassidy, I don't know, somebody told me something. It's a game of telephone. You know, Bobby sells seashells by the seashore. by the time it goes all the way to the other kid, it's like little Mary did something, no, you can't talk about, because these kids, these days. But the point is, that's one thing. But Liz Cheney and Benny Thompson could have corroborated it, but they never did. Instead, they served it up for all of America to eat, and many people did. So they wrote their report. Forensic document examiners busting Cassidy Hutchinson. She didn't write that note. Here's what they say. This is drafted by Catherine Copenhaver, certified questioned document examiner, written for our review back on July 24th, 2024, released to the public recently. She says, all right, Congress, I have reviewed the following documents sent to my office, and I have examined and compared the question documents to the exemplars to determine if they were written by the same person. All documents are machine copies. I do not have the originals. The questioned documents, Q1, is what this is labeled. We want to identify the author of this item. The note reads, anyone who entered the Capitol without proper authority should leave immediately. The note that we've seen here. Anyone who entered the Capitol without proper authority should leave immediately. Now, they've got exemplars. They've got 10 pages of notes written in the normal course of business, and there's an addendum, and I'm sure we're not getting those notes because they're probably Hirschman's notes, but they gave us the excerpts. Okay, so these are from his notes, and presumably this is what this person was using to review the items. Now, she says, I adhere to the SWG DOC regarding the standard for examination for handwritten items, which is also something that I approve or I confirm with the ANSI and the ADB, other boards. Now, the documents were examined using magnification and strong lighting. All of the handwriting characteristics were compared between the known writing and the questioned writing. Now, she explains, in order to establish that the handwriting was written by a particular person, here's how it works. On examination with known genuine handwriting must show substantial agreement in sufficient handwriting characteristics to identify the maker and eliminate the possibility of any other writer. So we're matching and also excluding. The handwriting characteristics that are evaluated include line quality, pressure pattern, rhythm, slant, size, proportions, spacing, including the utilization of space, spatial alignment, initial, terminal strokes, writing speed, legibility, skill level, letter forms, types of connectors, methods of constructions, and pattern formations. All of the handwriting characteristics were compared between the question and the known writing to determine if the handwriting was written by the person who completed the notes. The handwriting was examined and compared using magnification. Now, the first step in the examination of signatures is to determine if the question writing contains enough complexity to make it difficult to copy. Complexity is measured by the number of changes of direction in the writing line and the intersections that occur in the signatures. Now, the exemplars are then compared to the question writing to determine if they're suitable for comparison. Suitability is based upon the same type of writing signatures to signatures, handwriting versus handwriting, and hand printing compared to hand printing, although some similar characteristics can be matched between the forms. Now, ideally, exemplars should be written within 2 years of the questioned handwriting, although writing samples outside the 2-year range can be of assistance to us in making a determination. All of the handwriting characteristics are then compared between the questioned and known writings to determine if the handwriting is genuine, disguised, or simulated, right? Is somebody faking it to sign off like it's that person? The handwriting was examined and compared using magnification. So here's what this clearly credentialed person who knows what they're talking about has to say. The question before us: did Cassidy Hutchinson write this letter? Did she author this? Did Clavicle Girl author this? And the verdict is, based on the documents submitted, the evidence supports my opinion that the handwriting that appears on the questioned document was written in the same hand as Hirschman, not Cassidy Hutchinson. She didn't write it, according to this expert, saying in order to establish that a signature was written by a particular person, an examination with known signatures must show substantial agreement and eliminate the possibility of any other writer. The characteristics that are evaluated include all those things that I mentioned. Now, in order to make an identification of authenticity, there must be sufficient similarities. Any significant, unexplainable differences will be sufficient to eliminate the writer. So pretty high standards. There's like, well, those letters are like way too far off consistently. That's it. You're done. There are no significant differences between the questioned writing and the known exemplars. None. In fact, there are significant similarities between the questioned hand printing and the exemplars, and it's particularly true because of the unusual letter forms that are utilized by the writer. It is the similarity in handwriting characteristics that enabled me to identify the writer. It's not Cassidy attaches a copy of my current statements of qualifications, which sets forth my background, clearly highly credentialed, very, very qualified. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. I shall be prepared to go into greater detail about why Cassidy Hutchinson didn't write this document. See the addendum for details showing similarities between the question note and the exemplars. Signed respectfully by Catherine Malnoffy Copenhaver, Certified Question Forensic Document Examiner. Cassidy Hutchinson is busted. She didn't write this letter, but she said she did, and the losers on the J6 committee couldn't even figure it out. Eric Hirschman wrote it. He claimed he wrote it. He clearly wrote it because his handwriting matches and her handwriting doesn't. So why did Liz Cheney and the January 6th committee feed us literal fake news and it's bad evidence? And they made a point to say it doesn't even matter. Our bad evidence doesn't matter. It's not material, because they were faking a narrative. They needed to turn Cassidy Hutchinson into somebody she's not. They needed a star witness because everything they were presenting was falling flat, because it wasn't an insurrection. It never was. It was a riot that was enabled because they failed to prepare the place. Trump even confirmed it with the DOD, Mark Milley and Christopher Miller, who were there. They said, we had it handled, sir. It's all taken care of. Mayor Muriel Bowser rejected the availability of the National Guard to be there. It was all infested with dozens, if not hundreds, of federal or federally aligned associated agents. So they had to make it up. And now the truth is coming out. Wonder if Cassidy Hutchinson will correct the record anytime soon, or if she'll just let this lie linger in her book for all of the people on MSNBC to eat up. We think we know how this will go, but this wrecks the credibility of the rest of the investigation. It just shows you if they're lying here, where else are they lying? Answer: everywhere.